welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2019 movie Dolls. This was, frankly, an amazing cinematic experience insofar as it almost works, but manages to completely miss the mark on every level. Nobody that picks this, myself included, is going to look at the box art, say, I want to watch this, and press the play button, thinking that it's going to be a great movie. But I was honestly genuinely surprised at how much potential it had in so many different ways, but never actually manages to flesh any of it out. It just needs more thought, needs more care brought to the process, but not the least of which was character development and character interaction. I was kind of flabbergasted at how much of a spark there was in the first place, but then how little that spark got fanned by the director, by the writer, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here, just kind of get it out of the way and discuss the movie further. Obviously, none of my reviews are spoilery. My deep dives are, but none of these reviews are spoiler. So this follows the characters of Robert and Sammy Holbrook, principally. Robert is definitely our protagonist. He is a once successful children's book author. How about that? Once successful, no longer successful. In fact, is an alcoholic and in the middle of a divorce and so on and so forth. So his life is in a bit of disarray, and in attempt to kick the habit and get back on the ball of writing and get things back in order, he decides that the best place for him would be his mother's house. His mother had recently passed away, and decided to go ahead and get over there for some isolation and to kind of clean up the place a little bit. All right. And of course, he finds 3 dolls in the attic, and mysterious things start happening. His daughter Sammy comes to stay with him for a while, help him kick the habit, help him with the book, and so on and so forth. And she is kind of the principal person that notices the differences, and then the interactions between them. And then there's a host of other characters, but they're mostly just kind of cannon fodder in the background. Really, this has to do with Robert and Sammy interacting with one another. Now, there's a portion that happens fairly early on, so this is not a spoiler, but it is giving away some of the plot here, or at least an element. There's a moment in which I think the creators of this film wanted to have a little scare, a little gotcha moment, and it happened definitely in the first act. And I think that, unbeknownst to them, by having that little twingy of a gotcha moment thing there, it ruined the rest of the movie for me. And it had so much potential to keep me on the edge of my seat. This is never going to be a great movie, but this could have been a good movie. But this one little thing really threw a wrench in the works. And that was, at one point, Robert and Sammy are up in the attic, and they're looking at the dolls, and they're kind of, talking about them and so on and so forth. Robert is deciding to use them as inspiration for his new book, The Attic Dolls. And as they leave the attic, and the camera takes a close-up of the dolls, and one in particular who then smiles. And that, for me, ruins it. And I'll explain why. First of all, it happened outside of the perspective of the characters. And by doing that, you are bringing the audience into kind of more of an observation third-person mode. We are no longer watching the movie through the eyes of the characters on there. We are simply outsiders taking a 10-mile survey of the whole thing. And that makes a big difference. Just by having it when the characters leave that he smiles. That alone takes a lot of tension out of the rest of the movie, because there's a significant portion of the movie. The father is battling alcoholism. Of course, it's not a new concept. Nothing about this movie is a new concept. Killer dolls, It borrows elements from the Babadook, and so on and so forth. But the father's an alcoholic and he's trying to recover. So, it could easily play into that his perception of things or his interpretation of things or his point of view of things is faulty. And then you have character interaction of one faulty character's accounting of things, butting heads with potential reality. It calls into question the character's sanity and motives and so on and so forth. And then you have the daughter, who it explains early on in the film is or was on anti-anxiety meds and is simply cold turkeying. They're kind of basically helping each other wean themselves off of whatever medication or even self-medication that they were on. So you have two potential characters there that have questionable point of views. But the smile happens after they leave the room. It happens not to them, but to the audience. So it does happen. What I mean by that is we don't have a character's interpretation of, did I see them smile out of the corner of my eye? Is my brain playing tricks on me? Am I going through, DTs, anything like that? It is simply the audience observing the doll smile. So we know that the doll smiled. And throughout the entire rest of the movie, instead of having what is actually going on, to have that, still be a mystery, are the dolls actually alive? Are they actually embodied with the soul of demons and running around killing people? Or is it simply the visual manifestation of the psychosis of one of the characters? Are they doing this? Are we running into a situation like The Boy? Won't give that plot away, but there's just a dozen little things that were potentially happening throughout the rest of the movie, and every single time my brain started to say, well, what if it's that character? Wait, no, it's not that character doing that. The doll smiled to the audience. It's the killer doll thing. So it eliminated a lot of potential mystery and, mythos and all sorts of interesting stuff that could have been bouncing around in the audience's head, trying to figure out what's going on, who's doing what, and so on and so forth. And it simply just made it killer dolls, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then getting back to it, you never actually, not to be too spoilery, but, I think it's worth noting that you never actually see the dolls move aside from the smiles. I think possibly a slight turn of the head. I'm not sure, but you definitely don't see them walking around, holding knives and so forth. It all happens where, the camera will, switch angles and then there'll be a movement, that happened off screen, that a character reacts to. But if you're going to have killer dolls, then just go all in and, have them move around, have, a puppeteering staff on hand, or don't have him smile. Have it, up to the audience what's going on. Leaves a sense of ambiguity, a sense of mystery. The core of most every great horror film is a great mystery. What's going on? Who's doing it? Why are they doing it? How do they get out of it? And none of that was present in this film because of that smile to the audience. So, that little gotcha moment just completely blindsided me and ruined whatever other elements of this movie could have been great. So, that being said, the other elements of this film that I do want to discuss is the relationship between the father and the daughter of Robert and Sammy. I actually really liked. There were definitely moments in which the script fell through, the dialogue was kind of ham-fisted, and it was delivered poorly. But I was surprised at how much that was the exception and not the rule. Thomas Downey playing Robert Holbrook and Trinity Simpson playing Sammy Holbrook were actually pretty darn good together. The dialogue written for them was sharp and on point, and it was delivered with a sense of dry wryness that I actually really liked. So I was really impressed with this, and that was another thing that just made the rest of the movie kind of feel like you had so much potential. What happened there? And another element that really made this movie have potential but never actually follow through on it was the mythos of the killer dolls themselves. Whatever rules, backstory, or evil force guided the killer doll thing, this movie made a lot of effort to provide explanation for it, while at the same time never actually fully explaining anything solid. It was like listening to a 5-year-old try to tell an intricate story. It's like, they go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and by the time they're done with it, you have no idea what they actually said. And that lack of rule structure prevented a foundation for the protagonists to fight back in a meaningful way. If you know what's happening or who's doing it or why, then maybe there's a chink in that armor. Maybe there's some way to fight back. Maybe there's the the dagger that made them can unmake them, things like that. Just cheesy plot elements, but even so, give the actors a chance to fight back, or the characters a chance to survive. But there really wasn't a whole lot of that in this movie. They were basically just hopping from one foot to the other, reacting to the things that were happening around them, and never actually being proactive, which I think was a little bit it pulled me away from the movie. It didn't engage me as an audience member like it should have. If they had been, instead of just reacting to scenes, and if they had learned more and used that knowledge to their effect, whether or not they succeeded or not, the effort would have been more engaging. So all that tied together, total score of 35 points. I would not recommend this to anybody. Well, with one small caveat. I would not recommend this to anybody wanting a good, scary movie. I would not recommend it to any, general film lover, and even to horror film lovers. Expect a cheesy ride. But I would actually really recommend this to those interested in film studies or film production, mostly as a conversation piece, because I think this is actually worthy of a conversation piece. It shows a lot of elements of what small thing could they have done different in this regard, in this particular character's story, in this particular, plot element, in this particular camera work element? What small thing could they have done to have elevated it massively? Because that's all it was. This entire movie was made up of elements that were good. It had a good foundation, and it just needed that little bit of care, that little bit of professionalism, and that little bit of polish to really elevate it. And none of it, not one single element of this movie, actually managed to bring that level up. Camera work, characters, plot, script, sound design, any of it, just right there, and never got over that hump. So fascinating to watch on that one. So if you are a film studies student, if you are interested in film production, I think it's worthy of a conversation piece. So that's my recommendation for 2019's Dolls. I really thank you for joining me here today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.